Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Universalist Church of Rochester, Church of Open Minds and Loving Hearts since 1866, celebrating many sources of wisdom and many spiritual paths. Your faith, your doubts, your questions, your hopes for our world, and your story are welcome here. I'm glad to be back. For those who didn't know, I was gone last week because of COVID. I'm fresh out of quarantine, so I'm still going to mask today, but grateful for leaders who quickly provided last week's service, leadership, and pivoting with new plans. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. After service today, join us in the Commons for coffee and donuts, and a special invitation today to visit the table downstairs to sign up to help create welcoming Sunday mornings. We need you, we need all of us to help with greeting, with ushering, and more. The jobs are pretty easy. There are people to help you with instructions. There's a lot of grace, and it's a lot of fun. So whether you've done it 100 times or none at all, we need a lot of help, as always, each Sunday. And summer is a great time to try it out with just one service. So you can get through the routines and learn some things, meet some people. So join us for that. So we hope to fill out that summer calendar as soon as we can. So visit the table today right after service. Sign up. All ages are welcome. So thanks for helping. And there's gifts, thank you gifts for those who have done it as well, so please visit that table. Today is our annual flower communion. If you brought a flower, you're welcome to place it in these vases at any time during the service, or wait till the end of the service during a ritual where all will be invited to come forward to bring a flower and then take one as a blessing from this space. Next week, June 12th, we move to one service at 10 a.m. for the summer schedule through Labor Day. Following that service next week is our annual meeting with updates from your leadership about the life of the church. Church members are invited to vote on the slate of new leaders. You can vote now electronically, maybe you already have, with the link in your e-news, or you can vote that day during the meeting. You can contact the office with any questions. And we're also glad to begin a new offering practice. Beginning today, most Sundays, our entire collection for the offering will go out our doors to monthly justice partners. This will allow us to offer more support to practicing justice beyond our walls. We'll hear more about this month's offering recipient a little later in the service. Thank you for your generosity. So I invite you to take a breath as we enter in here and enter into this time with these words from the Reverend Eliza Tupper Wilkes, our minister in the 1870s. May our faith in humanity and our message of hope and good cheer light our way. It's good to be together. The hymn is Come Sing a Song With Me. I invite you to rise in body or spirit as we sing.
Now Smashed Daisies by me. There it lay, right on the sidewalk. Someone had a bad day. First I thought it was chalk. But no, it was a smashed daisy, stepped on at least twice. That seemed a bit crazy. Who'd kill a flower so nice? Was it a broken lover? Or a stem missing its beauty? I slowly bent over, just to hover, and traced that flower on the sidewalk in 2D. Walking by a week later, the outline was still there. The flower was gone, though. Someone had picked it up as a favor. But my perfect drawing had been left, and I couldn't help but stare. And I drew 20 more, my very own daisy garden. As I walked through my front door, I was glad I had never let my heart harden.
So I had a whole opening set up today, but then that piece and the chalice lighting really kind of teed up what I'm going to talk about today. So we're just going to go from there, and I'm going to tell you about Jaden's Impossible Garden. Because if you want a garden, you have to sow the seeds, right? The story comes to us from Elena Mengel and illustrated by Ken Daly. Jaden loved nature. At school, he played outside during recess. On field trips, he pretended to be a scientist, collecting acorns and stones and twigs. And in Jaden's favorite books, kids played in tree houses or climbed rocks. But after school, Jaden had to stay inside. There is no nature in the middle of the city, Mama said. Jaden knew that there was nature here. On his way home, he watched squirrels scrounge for snacks, and he listened to the calls of cardinals. He felt fat, furry snowflakes as they fell from the sky and landed on his face. Every day, a wheelchair van lowered Mr. Curtis onto the sidewalk in front of Jaden's building. He would inch forward and stop, and Mr. Curtis would look around from the sky to the ground. He'd close his eyes and breathe in the cold, fresh air. Then he'd wheel inside. Jaden wondered if Mr. Curtis wanted to be outside as much as he did. So every day, Jaden walked home very slowly, so he would get there just as the wheelchair van pulled up. He'd open the building door wide and waited as Mr. Curtis wheeled inside. "Thank you, Jaden," said Mr. Curtis. Mr. Curtis was outside one day as Jaden walked up. "What are you looking at?" Jaden asked. "That crocus," Mr. Curtis said. "How did that even get there?" "Magic," Mr. Curtis winked. Jaden smiled and then his shoulders slumped. "I have to go inside. Mama says there's nothing to do out here." "My daughter says that too," Mr. Curtis nodded. "But all I want to be is outside all day." "Mama, can I go outside with Mr. Curtis? He loves nature too." "What a kind idea," Mama said. "But Jaden, there is no nature in the middle of the city." But from then on, Jaden and Mr. Curtis met every day after school. Mr. Curtis told stories of his childhood adventures in Mississippi, and Jaden shared facts he'd found in animal books. They compared nature collections and searched for anthills. They built towers from old boxes and stones and sticks. "This is our secret fort," Jaden said. They planted mystery seeds in old containers. "Well, then this is our magical garden," Mr. Curtis said. One day, Jaden tried to share the secret with his mama. "Here's the magical fort garden I made with Mr. Curtis." "Those old buckets and boxes," Mama shook her head. "I'm glad you and Mr. Curtis are enjoying time together, but there is no nature in the middle of the city." So Jaden and Mr. Curtis made a plan. Mr. Curtis took empty coffee containers from his daughter's recycling. Jaden decorated them, and together they planted all types of seeds. Jaden recycled an old milk jug, and Mr. Curtis helped him cut holes in the middle to attach a string. They filled it with runner bead seeds. Together, they discovered something new that afternoon. They collected a caterpillar and made him the guardian of their fort. Jaden found an old basketball net and stretched it across his tower. It made a tiny hammock. Flowering green vines grew along the laundry lines. Mr. Curtis twirled the tendrils toward the tower. They became a royal rope bridge. Jaden was almost ready to reveal the magic Seafort garden. But would Mama see the garden the way he and Mr. Curtis did? Was there enough nature to show her? One hot summer evening, the secret got out. "Did you see all those butterflies?" asked Janice from down the hall. Mr. Williams from upstairs pointed to the dove nesting in the little net hammock. "Listen to the cooing. Look." Everyone rushed to the rope bridge. Jaden began pulling Mama down the stairs. "What is wrong, Jaden?" she said. "Listen, Mama," he said, taking her hand. "Look, a hummingbird," Jaden exclaimed. Mr. Curtis nodded and neighbors smiled. Everyone soaked in the beauty around them. "It's our magical secret fort garden," Jaden beamed. This time, Mama saw what Jaden saw. The magic of nature was all around them, right there in the middle of our city. And here's our magical secret seed garden, fort garden, right in front of us. So I'm going to take the kids downstairs, and we're going to make some flowers that we can share a little later. As the choir comes up, we'll meet over by this door.
In last month's Chalice Circle, we discussed nurturing beauty. One of the options for reflection was sharing the story of the most beautiful thing you've ever experienced. After much thought, I realized that many of my most beautiful experiences revolved around fragrances, aromas that could reduce me to tears in a heartbeat. My mom liked to garden, and two of the most cherished plants that I remember were our gardenia bush by the front door and the paper white narcissus she tended on the north side of our house in San Diego County. She would bring in the gardenia blooms and float them in a bowl of water. Their fragrance would waft around the living room. It's one of my favorite memories, even if it usually deposited a few ants into the living room as well. I even went through the jungle gardenia perfume stage in my teenage years until my dad couldn't bear it any longer. Most Easters during my childhood, we spent the weekend with family friends in Los Angeles. They lived in a little development of detached one-bedroom cottages around a common area with a pool, barbecue grill, and orange trees, which were usually in blossom at Easter. My most evocative childhood memory is the confluence of orange blossoms, chlorine, and grilling steaks. Decades later, my late husband and I were at a resort in Arizona one March, just strolling around. And boom, there it was. Orange blossoms, a swimming pool, and folks grilling steaks. The tears came before I could even process the thought. When we moved to Seattle, I was introduced to hyacinths and massive Pacific Northwest rose gardens. Every year now, Gus and I bring in hyacinths to help spur along spring. Moving to Minnesota brought me lilacs, and I could have been found 2 weeks ago standing on the median on Memorial Parkway with my nose in the lilac bushes. When my late husband, Jerry, passed away, we were living on a farm in rural Mazeppa. Our elderly neighbor brought me cuttings from her probably 100-year-old peony bush for the funeral. Fortunately, I had the presence of mind to bring a cutting with me to Rochester when I moved here. After praying I didn't kill it when I transplanted it, I anxiously awaited the next spring. And now, 16 years later, the plant is huge and needs to be tied to stay upright. The heat over the last weekend had it blooming and fading in about 3 days, so sadly there are no blooms to bring to this year's flower communion. But they are an annual source of joy for me. I loved my time on the farm, with the very well-defined cycles of the seasons. We started hundreds of plants each year, watching them germinate under lamps while there was still snow outside the windows. It was always a gamble when to transplant them in the field. We won some and we lost some. When we were outside on a perfect late spring evening in the company of the red-winged blackbirds, my mind would be on David Mallett's garden song. Grain for grain, sun and rain, find my way in nature's chain. Tune my body and my brain to the music of the land. May it be so for all of us.
Good morning. It is good to be with you. I invite you to settle in here as we create a place of communal caring and connection. It's our time to pause amidst the busyness of our lives, to slow down enough to consider the beauty that is here all around us, and to open a space for listening and love. Here we honor all who support us in this caring, loving, and all-inclusive ministry. We send gratitude to Colleen Murphy, serving as our caring coordinator for the last 2 weeks, arranging care for our members and friends in need. Rhonda Lorenz will take over tomorrow for the next 2, and we thank her for that. The members of our caring committee are wonderful examples of our compassionate community, holding us up as we go through happy and challenging times. And these last 2 years have taken a lot out of us. They have taken a lot from us. If during this time of increasing needs in our lives you are experiencing challenges, we encourage you to reach out for support and help. Many of us may need additional care, whether it be personal pastoral care or other assistance, and we encourage you to reach out to Reverend Luke or myself with that request. Today's flowers are shared by all of us. Yay! In this community, we share pieces of our lives with one another. We do this because all people here have value. Each person's experience matters. We lift up those who are experiencing sadness, illness, or loneliness. May the strength and love in our congregation help guide you. We revel in those who are experiencing joys in their lives. May their happiness lift us all, and may their joy filter into all around them. May all of us find love, hope, joy, and healing strength in our community. Included in your order of service today is a list of those who submitted wonderful life milestones, such as graduations and retirements. We know there are even more celebrations out there, and we recognize you all and hold you in your celebrations. Margot Stick reports that the hip surgery, which she underwent on May 23rd, went well with no complications. She is grateful for the healing wishes and varied support extended by so many of you. This is truly a caring congregation, and we wish Margot continued healing. As our UUs have been doing for over 150 years, we are continuing to adjust to an ever-changing world and new ways of doing things. Through this time of adjustment and canceling and rescheduling, we ask for hope and patience, understanding and acceptance, and a renewed commitment of service to those in our lives, church, and community. May the faith in the Spirit of life, love for the community of earth, and love for the light in each other be ours now and in all the days to come.
I invite you to take a deep breath. Breathe deep the breath of life. Feel below you the earth and its ancient turning, and above you the sky, and beyond that the stars shining with their ancient light, holding you in this moment, this breath, yourself made of earth and stars. Know that in this house you are named, you are known as beloved, as sacred. I invite you into this time of meditation, this time of prayer, first by sharing silence together. Spirit of life and source of love, God of many names and beyond all naming, Spirit of sun and moon, earth and stars, alive within all things. The soul can get weary some days, many days, wondering about if we have done enough or what else could be done, weary about things that feel like they should have been fixed or that might be beyond change, of how we care for each other or what we value or where we find love. Though at times the seeds we plant don't come to fruition, at least in any way we recognize, or bear fruit or beauty in ways we hope for. Help us remember there are unknown ways that love still takes root. sometimes deep underground or deep in the mud. Not that all our efforts or all our hopes all come to life in the ways we need them, but sometimes help us remember that something breaks through, to remind us it is worth planting seeds of love and justice amidst the uncertainty or amidst the weariness, because that's the only way any good love can take root and grow. We hold in our heart this day all those who suffer in mind, body, or spirit. I invite you to bring the names you're holding this day, in joy or sorrow, celebration or concern, and silently or aloud now in this time to speak their names. For all the names spoken and unspoken, may we all be held in grace and love. These words of meditation come from Linda Hogan, from part of her poem entitled The Way In. Sometimes the way in is a song, but there are three ways in the world: dangerous, wounding, and beauty. To enter stone, be water. To rise through hard earth, be plant, desiring sunlight and believing in water. To enter fire, be dry. And to enter life, be food. May it be so. Amen. We have an introduction for this month's offering recipient. Phil Wheeler will share.
Good morning. I'm Phil Wheeler, a member of this congregation. Back in 2018, the congregation of this church adopted a congregational resolution that in part commits us to being a sanctuary church. We did this because our Unitarian Universalist roots, I can't see, remind us of our moral responsibility to welcome and care for the immigrant, the stranger, and the most vulnerable among us. And because we consider the deportation of otherwise law-abiding but undocumented residents to be inhumane in many circumstances and fundamentally in conflict with our values. The resolution commits us to collaborating with other faith communities to support and promote justice for immigrants in need, and we are part of the Southeastern Minnesota Interfaith Immigrant Legal Defense as part of this commitment. Our UU Immigrant Justice Fund is another major part of that commitment. This fund supports efforts related to the Afghan family that we have been working with, and also to a family of asylum seekers from Nicaragua, that some you may have heard about recently. One of those Nicaraguan asylum seekers is a young man named Pedro. Pedro was arrested, jailed, and mistreated in Nicaragua for protesting the Ortega government's crackdown on civil liberties. On arriving in the U.S., he was put in detention in Texas, where he spent 6 months. He represented himself in an asylum hearing in late April, lost his case, and waived his right to appeal. We had only 7 days to get his waiver rescinded and to prevent his deportation. With the assistance of an attorney that John McLaughlin reached through a UU church in Texas, and based on a commitment on the part of our church to assist with asylum sponsorship, Pedro was granted the right to file an appeal, and 3 weeks later he was released from detention. He arrived at MSP Airport on May 25th to be greeted by his sister and her family and John. Pedro won't receive work authorization until September. He arrived here without luggage, with only his papers and the clothes he was wearing. He needs clothing, food, lodging, transportation, and transportation in particular to Hawthorne School for English classes. Along with resources available in the community, for example, Channel One, the Immigrant Justice Fund is providing for this support. We are not alone in this. Others in the Interfaith Coalition are contributing to this fund also. We are all operating in the faith that our collective compassion and generosity will be sufficient to share our hope. Thank you.
In gratitude, we'll receive today's offering.
The reading is Gardening by Rena Espelot. My hands are in the dirt, 10 fingernails black with it, and half worms coming up to writhe in the hole that I've made with a rusty trowel. I nudge them out, drop them where shade is deeper and moister. Nothing to be alarmed about, I tell them. There's enough dirt for us all. Roots from our neighbor's greedy birch, caught on the wrong side of the fence, drop their booty of damp clumps from black, sweaty little fists. I pat them back under, dig a new hole. If I don't see you, I don't know you're there, I tell them. Do as much for me someday. With my hands in this dirt, I'm on good terms with everything but weeds, polite even with them. Sorry, I tell the creamy fuzz bursting from the dandelion's pursed lips. Nothing personal, you're just out of place. And I pry it loose like a bad habit. Any dirt at all will lead you into every grave you can think of, with a stick long enough and time enough for digging. I reach down deep for my mother's mother, show her the tomato buds, stroke her to sleep, promising her at least enough to eat. And listen, my father's mother, midwife and singer of poems, that champion laugher whose fat roses scented my early days, under my nails, wherever I dig, still laughing. I tell her I sing roses too, my hands in dirt where she lives forever.
It started slowly, the gentle bow, and then eventually the crack along the grain. The bricks along the bottom helped hold it in place, but those too were starting to chip away from age and from pressure. That happens to about everything, doesn't it? After going perhaps a half season or so too long, it was time for the garden bed walls to be replaced. They had a good run. It had held what was meant to be held for quite a while, just time and age and use. It was well worn, well used, providing seasons of nourishment, some for us, a lot for the bunnies and for the chipmunks. But we have a belief that a garden can be at times meant for all creatures, great and small, but the time had come that it just couldn't hold what it needed to hold anymore. Then the planning, the way the mind or the conversation goes in 1,000 different directions. We could raise it up several feet, or we could have easy handling by having it really high, or we could rip up everything with a completely different layout. We could build up the sides with the gate and the fencing to keep out all the critters, but they're so cute when they come in there. Or we could just make it the same. Maybe it should be metal, maybe it should be wood, maybe something else. And after a while, when the mind is about as mushy as the mud you're going to have to move during this rebuild, the time comes. Because if you want a garden, you're going to have to sow the seeds, sang the choir. If you want a garden, you're going to have to make a decision about how and where it's going to be, what you're going to do. It's the same as the work for the common good. The practice of justice or ethics or just simple kindness, generosity, the practice of spirituality and religion and community. It's like what the activist Bayard Rustin, who was a black, gay, pacifist, Quaker revolutionary, what he called the long haul of transformation. Planting seeds for a garden to grow years from now or maybe generations away is beautiful, heartbreaking, sometimes agonizing work with no sense of certainty. And it's often the only type of work that yields anything nourishing. That seed planting, garden envisioning work takes patience and time, hard work and planning, and sometimes against your very inner core, it takes letting go of certainty. At some point, you just have to decide, we're going in this direction, or we're going to try this, whatever direction it is, and move with faith and adaptability and courage and care to make of it what you can, come what may. There's enough dirt for all of us, writes the poet today. Any dirt at all will lead you into any grave you can think of. Under my nails, wherever I dig, still laughing there, ancestors, I sing roses too, my hands in the dirt where she lives forever. Gardens are like the embodiment of generations, reminding us that we too are the connective tissue between the past and the future. I've been thinking during these tumultuous years about the garden that is this church. What seeds were planted generations ago that came to life, have flourished. What lives, stories, moments live in the soil that nurture us still. Many of you know we've been discerning the future of our building and grounds during these years and well before that. If you need a refresher or new to the conversation, you can check out uurochmn.org/building our future for a little summer refresher list of links to check out. This is an important work in our church. So this summer is a great chance to get caught up before forums and maybe decisions in the next year of where we're headed. This is our fourth building, and we can think of those transitions in very practical terms, in part about growth, about changing needs and more, and that is true. And that was true last spring with our consultant, where this church indicated as a top challenge and priority our building and grounds. And it's also true that the building changes every 50 years or so in the past have come at times of massive social happenings. We can mark these changes by our own congregational needs, to be sure, but also these. It was interesting looking at this history, thinking about it. Our first two buildings were built at the end of the Civil War and during Reconstruction. Our third building built at the end of World War I. Our current building built at the height of the Vietnam War and in the midst of the Civil Rights Movement. There can be 1,000 conclusions or reasons as to why they chose those times to build, and many of those reasons would be true. And perhaps a consistent theme was, in these times of massive change, they're asking questions about what does it mean to be in community? What are we building for and planning for? What seeds are we planting for whatever comes 50 years or more down the road? Because these times of massive change remind us how important community is to us and how we need to nurture them the best way we know how. Maybe it starts with asking questions about, is the space we're in embodying the best values we can, nurturing what it needs to nurture? And like anything, any good spirituality, any good ethic, it starts with asking questions not about personal preference, but about the common good of the community. So some people have asked these questions during this process, and these have stuck with me about our space. If you have mobility concerns or a stroller and a diaper bag and several small children and winter gear, how do the flights of steps from the parking lot feel in the middle of January coming to church, right? Or if nature is your spiritual taproot, how connected do you feel to it inside? Or how does it feel to have the environmental impact this building does? Or how does it feel to be in this space with its ventilation or lack thereof in the midst of plague and pandemic? If you're gender nonconforming or need assistance in a restroom from a caregiver, how welcoming are the bathrooms? If you park in the accessible spots up top, how is that slope for you? Or the thaw and freeze season between those spots and the front door? Or if we idolize a certain location or question other locations around the city, How does that feel to folks who travel many miles to church every time they come, or who live in that other part of the city? If you're overwhelmed by crowded spaces because of sensory sensitivities, how is a packed commons or lobby area or small corridors to rooms or the entire congregation watching you if you come in late or leave a little early from service? How does that feel? And maybe all those things are fine or familiar for you. Maybe they're not. Maybe they are or aren't for others. But the questions at their best are not about, I like how this looks or I don't, my personal preference. The questions are always, in community, does the space best embody our values of justice, inclusion, compassion, hospitality, the best ways they can? And if not, how can we do better? These are necessary, complicated, and beautiful questions. Like with anything, whether you're discussing raised beds, metal, or wood, there is not one way forward. There's not just one choice. There are many possibilities, many possible paths to figure out how to best live and practice our values of justice and spiritual growth. And like any community, we talk about church time as being cold as slow molasses. It takes time to figure it out and keep moving forward in a way where folks feel they are part of it. And sometimes if you want a garden and a crowded table and a place by the fire for everyone that brings us together, then you have to plant seeds. You have to start somewhere. You have to start making some plans, start to dig, get your hands in the dirt and the muck of it all to the future of whatever needs to be nourished and how best to nurture it. This banner hanging on the pulpit this morning is from my Methodist grandparents. It hangs in my office all the time. It's some of the lyrics to our closing hymn that we'll sing in a bit. It speaks of gardens, which is the embodiment of generational connection. And the Methodist connection here is both for me, but also for our Universalist heritage. Much of our theology we share from different parts of the Methodist tradition, who were stalwarts for a type of universalism as well. The words speak about something, it says, that holds a mystery. Whether in this hymn it be God, or for you it be love, or justice, or hope, it sings about some unknown future. As we sing that hymn in a little while, feel free to choose what words hold that mystery for you. It says something God alone can see. Maybe you'll sing love alone or hope alone. There'll be some different options on the screen too. Sing what you'd like. But to know, what can love and hope imagine or create? Because what we find there in this soil, all the soil we are in, are stories that have brought us here to begin with. It doesn't mean where you are hasn't nourished you well, like the gardens that need replacing and fixing. But a garden needs tilling and tending sometimes to keep it healthy and as filled with much hope and nourishment as possible. Planting seeds is what we're about all the time, not always knowing what will come of it, and making sure there's enough dirt packed with the love of generations for all of us. The flower communion is a Unitarian ritual and celebration. It was invented and introduced by the Reverends Norbert and Maya Čapek in 1923 in Prague for a congregation of almost 3,000 Unitarians. Norbert was accused of heresy and subversion, tried for treason twice by the Nazis, and in each case the evidence against him was taken from his own sermons. His words on Sunday services were read against him, and in 1942 he was deported to the concentration camp at Dachau, where he died. In 1940, Maya came to the United States and brought the flower communion to the Unitarian Church in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The flower communion was very simple. People were asked to bring a flower either from their garden or the roadside or the pasture on the last Sunday before summer. When they arrived at church, vases would be there waiting to receive their flowers offering. These flowers signified that it was by their own free will they joined this community, bringing whatever gifts they had to offer. Today we celebrate that communal bouquet, this garden of wildflowers we create together a garden of people with varying skills and gifts, abilities, spiritualities. At its best, it is a rich and diversified and nourishing soil. The poet and minister Lisa Day writes this: "No hothouse flowers, these, bred for perfection, dyed and trimmed, arranged to order. No, these are hardy, raw, and wild, grown under the sky. They've weathered the wind and the rain and the heat. They survived pests and disease. These grow where they were planted by loving hands. No, these were by the whim of birds or the breeze. These have petals washed by dew and the sea, prairies and rocks. No, not perfect, these, only holy, a blessing to the senses and the heart and the soul."
For those who have served as a worship leader or a volunteer for the groups, classes, committees, and events, this flower is for you.
For those who have shared your time, talent, or treasure to this church and to the wider community for a more loving and just world, this flower is for you.
It was very busy.
For those who brought your little ones to the nursery and those who participated or helped volunteer for Chalice Camp, bringing life and energy into our church, this flower is for you.
For our children and our families, those who have learned and played and created with the intensity of family and school and quarantines. For our youth and volunteers, growing together by seeking both inspiration and connection. This flower is for you.
For those who have provided music, adults and now children again, singing, and for all who have added their voice and heart to making music in person again, this flower is for you.
For those who have helped care for the building, gardening, weeding, helping set up and care for our spaces, this flower is for you.
For those who joined us at the History Center to begin our year and stayed online through the midwinter, for guest musicians adding beauty of many voices and instruments, this flower is for you.
For those who have helped care for others through cards and phone calls and notes, if you have helped create spaces for fun and fellowship in our community, online or outdoors, this flower is for you.
For those who have signed their name to join this church, or those who have helped with the memorial service or the auction or the pledge drive, for those who have said yes in large and small ways to attend these hard days with grace and flexibility and a good spirit, for those who love this church or at least are willing to give it a try now and then, and for all of us who believe there's still goodness in the world, especially when we question it, that we know you can count on this community, this place, to provide solace for your soul to be held. These flowers are for all of us. Reverend Chapek wrote this about the flower communion. This service emphasizes our liberty and common cause. Here in the spiritual community, by choice, we are kindred. And when we go home, each one is to take a flower just as it comes, without making any distinction where it comes from or whom it represents. to confess to one another that we accept each other as kindred, without regard to class or race or other distinction, acknowledging everybody as our friend who is human and wants to be good. Even though one may be disappointed 1,000 times or fallen in the fight and everything would worthless seem, be grateful, my soul, for in this life I have lived amidst eternity. During the music, I invite you to come up and place a flower if you still have one to offer, and also to come up and receive a flower, any flower from any vase, to grab it and take it with you as a reminder that each of us offers what gifts we are able, and we are offered gifts from this community everywhere we go. Please come forward as the music plays. To rise and body or spirit for Hymn of Promise. It's in your order of service, the music. There will be lyrics on the screen as well. We'll sing verses 1 and 2, and at the end of verse 2, there's a couple options there for you. I invite you to sing along these words from the Methodist and Universalist traditions. invite you to take your flower and feel and notice and look, smell through your mask if you're not just out of quarantine, whatever. Enjoy this flower. May we too be as fleeting, as fragile as it may seem. May we too know beauty pops up everywhere. And it is together that we create what will grow and nurture it for the spring that waits to be. May it be so. Amen.